So about 10 years ago, I used to own a record label with a close friend named B-Dot. Now, there's three things you gotta understand about my friend named B-Dot. The first is, he's originally from California, so this was his first time in Arkansas. The second is that he's of the, I guess you call it like height challenge side. So he was about like 5'5", 5'6". And the third thing about my intelligent, well-spoken, inspiring friend B-Dot is whenever insects were around, he completely lost all his common sense, right? Completely wigged out. Now, just to kind of describe this and put in the frame of reference, one time I was out of town, so he was back at the apartment. I got a call from B-Dot. I picked up. He was like, "Piff, you got to help me out. There's a big roach in your room, and I don't know what to do." So once again, he's from California. He called it big roach. We call them water bugs, right? So I was like, I thought about it because I was like, okay, I went to Stanford, have an ME degree. I thought about it, so I responded, "Kill it," okay? To which he then responded, he was like, "I can't kill it because if I go in there, it might get on me, might get in my hair. I heard they sometimes reproduce in your ears." I said, whoa, B-Dot, whoa. I used a whole different strategy. I hit the red button on my phone and hung up because I had better things to do. So about 2 days later, I came back home, and as I entered my apartment and went to my bedroom door, I saw this wet towel that was laying between the door and my carpet. And B-Dot then proceeded to explain to me that two things were gonna happen. Either he had trapped the bug, or he was gonna starve it out, so when I came back, the bug would just be laying upside down and I could clean it up. This was his way of solving the bug issue. Now, at this time, we were, I call it like professional panhandlers. Every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we would sell our CDs at the club. We would enter about get there at 10 o'clock, and then we basically sell CDs to about 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, at the time, I had a deal with God, like, if you don't get me shot up at the club, I'll be at church every Sunday. I'm not sure if you're supposed to make deals like that with God, but I did, and I didn't get shot, so I still do. But basically, I went to bed at 6 o'clock that night. 8 o'clock, basically, I got up for church. And so I was coming back to take my post-church nap. I entered my apartment one more time. B-Dot was coming out of his room, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got to talk to you about something." I took a step back because he had the morning breath thing going on, but I was like, "What's going on?" He was like, "Are you ever gonna fix this hole?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Are you ever gonna fix this hole, man?" And I was like, "Bruh, I'm tired, wanna go to sleep, please be clear." He was like, pointing at the wall, I was like, "Dude, are you ever gonna fix this hole in the wall?" And I looked at the wall and I saw absolutely no hole. I saw a thermostat, but nothing else there. But once again, I said he was a little bit shorter than I was, so I kneeled down a little bit. And there was this huge, rectangular hole, missing out my wall. And I was like, "Dude, did you put a hole in my wall, man?" He said, "Nah, it's been there for the last 2 years since I've lived with you. It's always been there." And it hit me that this hole in the wall, he had been seeing every day because where he stood, and not only that, it harbored the insects that were kind of invading our apartment. So as I stood back up, I realized I had two options. The first was, now that I knew this hole existed and played a part in his role in his life every day he would see it, I could then play a part in fixing this hole. Or the second thing I could do was continue to stand at the same level I was and never pay attention to this hole again and continue living my life. And at this time is when I realized that I had height privilege, all right? Now, I use that story a lot of times to talk about when I'm in different conversations to talk about actually relating that to white privilege, right? Most of the times amongst white associates, sometimes I don't really like them, but we still have this conversation about white privilege, right? And it's cool because it's normally successful. It's a way to kind of be slightly humorous and approach it from a nice standpoint. But over time, I've learned I don't like using this story as much because I feel it plays upon two fears. The first fear is normally amongst the people I'm talking to, and that they sometimes feel that they might be guilty of what's being accused, and they kind of retaliate back. So it never goes anywhere, it just ends up being a combative conversation. The second fear is for myself because I didn't want to be the combative person because I might come off as the angry black man, right? Which is kind of crazy because some of the disadvantages of white privilege definitely should cause me to be angry. I've checked my pedigree, I've been black for a little bit, and I am a man, so I fit the categorization of an angry black man, but I don't want to do that because I might be ostracized from these associates, so I choose not to. Now, that's been a problem now because I strongly believe that overcoming fears helps better yourself, which helps better your environment and help better the world. Now, we all understand that the three sticky things that talk about race, politics, and religion, right? So I'll give another example of a fear I overcame to help me better myself and better my world. Back in the day, I used to be deathly afraid to talk to any attractive female or any female I had interest in. Okay, story time. So I was in this club in D.C. with my homeboys. We was kicking and having a good time. I saw her from across the room. She saw me. Gang recognized gang. It was all cool, right? So then, afterwards, I saw her outside the club, and as I began approaching her, something strange happened. Like, although I've done well in all my English classes and communication, I'm fairly decent with that, the closer I got to her, like, all the thoughts in my mind just started disappearing. And even further than that, like, what started increasing was my sweat glands. So, like, as I stood right before her, looking like a glazed cinnamon donut, I was about to talk to her, and I knew if I didn't say something quick, I'd lose her. So I looked in the eyes, she looked at me, and I said, right? For what she did, she looked me back and said, "Are you serious?" Turned around and walked away. That's what it is, right? So it was funny because I realized later on where this fear came from. And in the third grade, I met a lady named Sarah. And immediately when I met Sarah, I knew I loved her. I knew we was gonna get married. I was gonna give her my kids. I was gonna give her my insecurities. We were gonna grow up to be like happy and bitter at the same time. I knew that in the third grade because I was advanced, right? And so we exchanged numbers, and over that summer we became like real close friends, and God ordained it for us to be in the same homeroom for fourth grade, right? So I spent the first 2 weeks on like a Mission Impossible style, figuring out how I was gonna tell her to be my girlfriend. Ask her to be my girlfriend. So I timed it and met her directly at the door, and I said, "Jennifer, will you be my girlfriend?" Sarah. She told me like never to say her name again in this story again, so hopefully y'all ain't taking it. So I asked her, Sarah, I said, "Sarah, will you be my girlfriend?" She looked back at me and said, "Sean, I would love to be your girlfriend." Top status, right? So whenever I get elated, I feel like I'm floating. All the kids went to play kickball. I just floated, went straight to the ledge and sat on the ledge and was just sitting there in peaceful bliss, right? About 5-10 minutes later, out my peripheral, I see Sarah's best friend come running over, and she runs up to me and says, "Sean, Sarah was just playing. She would never be your girlfriend. She doesn't like you like that." And I looked at her back and I said, I know she would never like me like that. I take sympathy points. It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. All right. And so at this moment, what's crazy is not only did I feel that anybody I was interested in basically wouldn't return interest, but any relationship from that point, I felt like I was supposed to be the victim, like I was supposed to be embarrassed, and I was supposed to be the butt of the joke. So I constantly ended in relationships where I kind of got abused, right? So it's crazy because I did overcome this, but when I did overcome the fear, I realized that not only did I gain great relationships, both romantic and non-romantic, but these people helped bolster me up, they helped inspire me. Some of them provided business connections and did a lot of things to help me become a better man, to help me better my environment, right? Now, as I was doing this speech, I realized that was kind of a softball because that was kind of easy to talk about because it's something I overcame. And as I wanted to demonstrate how sometimes I look at issues and dig to the root of the issue, I wanted to talk about something that I still have a problem with that I haven't overcome yet. And it's real silly because I know that it's not really an issue, but it is. And that is that I've never told my father to his face that I love you, right? I might probably did it as a kid, but I just never have done it since I've been older and been a grown man. Now, the method I use to basically break this down and figure out where the root of this problem comes from is I ask why 3 times. And each time I peel back a separate layer, right? So the first level of why is, and why this is also crazy is because if you understood like how much I love my dad and how much my dad loves me, he's like, on my level of hero status, he's like well below Jesus, but like above Batman. And if y'all knew how much I love Cape Crusader, so he's like one of my closest friends and I love him dearly. But as I played the why game, the first level was, that's just not what we do, right? We've had this routine established and this habit established, that's not what we've done for a while, so there's no need to break it. The second level of why is I don't do it because it just be awkward now, you know? My dad's cool in the mug, I'm cool in the mug, no need to make it awkward, right? So we just kind of keep letting it flow. But as I was honest and I looked at the fundamental level of why I don't say I love you to my father in person, it's because if I said it and if he didn't say it back, I would feel crushed. And it's crazy because I'm a grown man, and once again, I don't even question if my dad loves me, but I know I feel like a child, and I would ultimately, at the root of this is I have a fear of rejection from my father. Crazy. So that's how I use the 3 whys and break that down, right? So I want to use one more example before I issue a challenge to y'all. That example I want to grab on from something we spoke about before, which is why do a lot of white folks or white people, I don't know what the PC term is, why do a lot of white people not acknowledge white privilege? And I want to play the why game one more time. The first level I got is because it's easier to kind of point the finger somewhere else, right? So if I'm speaking from the black community, it's easy to say, but you guys have this problem in your community. You guys propagate this. Look at all these issues. Completely makes sense. If I peel that back again, it's because what I kind of gathered is that it's easier to point the finger than to have true self-reflection and self-analysis, right? To actually listen and kind of take that into consideration. The third level I got to was, if perchance these accusations might ring true, because of most people's moral code, not only would they have to accept and acknowledge it, which sometimes leads to a little bit of awkwardness, but they would actually have to work and take action to overcome this. And we all work hard and we're not trying to do extra work. Therefore, white privilege doesn't exist, right? So, lastly, before I issue this challenge to y'all, I had to think about, why do I even issue this challenge? So in other words, why ask why? So help me out one more time. So why ask why? The first level is for knowledge. Everybody says knowledge is power, knowledge is key, knowledge, a lot of different cliches we say all the time. Sounds good. Second level is, I think what I touched on before, it helps dig up problems, or what I said before, you can basically find fears and basically overcome these fears, which then helps you better your environment. So that's like why we actually dig in a little bit deeper. The last level was kind of where it got a little bit iffy, a little bit sticky, because it was a personal thing, and it's because basically I feel like we know that we should become better. And that's what became weird, is like, ever since I was a child, I understood that I had a purpose on this earth, and that my purpose on this earth wasn't just for me, but was to help better other people and help better my universe. So right here and now, I'm not speaking to everybody in the room, but just speaking to the people who understand that their purpose in life is greater than themselves. And for that, I issued a challenge to y'all. Whenever y'all next encounter something that's maybe controversial, something that's a problem, something you've been wrestling with, or something that's new, don't just brush it off, but maybe dig deeper by the why process of whatever it is to figure out what might be the root of that problem. And the reason to do this is because we need it. Simple as that. Now, before I leave, I have 3 last statements to make. The first one is, we were all meant to be great. It's just our choice if we accept it. The second one is, fears really, really, really suck, but every time we overcome them, we become better for it. And the third one is, Dad, I'm looking forward to after the speech because I got something to tell you. Thank you.
So this is cool. I didn't see this coming a few months ago.
Was talking?
Me and you on the stage together,
like
man.
the Fireside chat seats. I didn't know we were.
Right, yeah. So I want to tell y'all real quick how I met Piff. So I actually knew about Piff from years before, because you guys don't understand how multi-talented this guy is. This guy's an educator, he's a musician, he's a Stanford-trained engineer, and the list goes on. He's an MMA fighter, he lost. He's a terrific guy. But my wife and I were on a date in Argenta, which is a cool neighborhood in North Little Rock, and we were walking down the street one night. We were actually headed back to our car, and we walked by this place called The Joint, and they were just like the dopest beats you've ever heard in your life, just coming out of this place. And my wife stopped and said, "We're going in there." And I walked in, and I saw this big, tall dude standing in the front of the bar, and I recognized your picture from a magazine, and I was like, "Are you Piff Morrow?" And we've been friends like ever since. And he is a true friend. So on the subject of your talk, I want to give you a little better introduction because you deserve it. So diving into the subject of fears a little bit more. So what are some techniques, or what are some points that you could give us on facing fears, facing the fear of getting in the ring with a 15-year-old? Facing the fear of getting on stage and performing, facing the fear of talking to that young lady and introducing yourself, facing the fear of going overseas, and this is another thing you guys don't know about him, taking young people overseas to a foreign country to teach other cultures about music and educate those young people. What are some things that you do to face fear and be a champion in life?
Well, first, I'm by far not an expert, but what I've learned that helps me a lot is kind of like to dive all in, right? So another fear I had, and I think I've told you this story before, is like I used to be deathly afraid to do public speaking. Like I really would panic and hide in fetal position if y'all were out here. And the way I got over it actually was I entered a talent show. So my thing was just dive in. So I entered a talent show and rapped in this talent show, basically just to overcome this fear. And what I found is after I did my rap, which sucked by the way, after I did the rap, like nobody
Eli
like
Porter.
stole on my mom or like basically kidnapped my little sister. Like nobody did anything bad. Like there was really no horrible outcome. So I kept doing it. And the second time I actually did it, I actually fell in love with performing, which led me to rap. So I usually, like when I find a fear, I usually kind of, within rounds, I kind of like try to tackle it head on, and you quickly realize it's like not that big of a thing. Yeah.
So I mentioned that, and this is less related to your talk, but I think it's relevant. I mentioned that you have a program that I'd like you to talk a little bit about, introduce it, where you work with students, you take young people overseas. You just came back from Morocco, correct? Right. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, what that's about?
Right, so that last frog program I did was actually with a program out of UALR called CWDSA. That's another program I'm involved with. You see one, Dr. Roberts, I see you. But the other program I do is called Global Kids Arkansas, and that takes children from underserved communities with interest in like global leadership and international policies, and they have like a summer training, and then they go overseas to work on summer service projects. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So what are some of the outcomes of that? What kind of things do you see that come back from that? What are some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, so we kind of just monitor them and basically provide. So the whole thing is like, the reason for the overseas experience in my mind is because if you have a non-tourist overseas experience, you come back and don't see the world the same way. So it's one of the few positive ways to impact somebody's paradigm and shake it up. And then so when they come back, we try to offer the tools for them to shape what they learn from there. So it's kind of more so listening and learning and providing the correct outlets and resources for them to build what they want to build. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to tell you something, man. I'm glad you're my friend, and I'll always be here to serve you.
Humble, man. Appreciate you, bro.
Thanks, Pip.